Hello and welcome everybody to another episode here on the Sitrep podcast. I am Oriskany Jim, of course, and for today's content, we're going to try something kind of, I don't want to say strange, something a little unusual. We did have some plans for today's stream, but things kind of went a little sideways. So we had to come up with some content at virtually the last minute, but that's cool. So there's been something I've been kind of meaning to try for a little while. And tonight's going to be a good night to do it. It doesn't require a whole lot of lead time. You can kind of launch it right off the bat. I promise this isn't a change in format. This isn't a new feature. This isn't something I plan to be doing, regularly on the channel, because I think it would get a little dull eventually. But what we're going to be looking at today is almost a recommended reading list. Some really good books. That I think are going to be helpful, or I think could be helpful here to members of our community. So, number one, of course, they all pertain directly to military history, which of course is, the focus of our channel. But more specifically, I've got like almost, I don't even know how to describe it. I've got rooms, plural, full of military history books. We would never go through all of those, obviously. The ones that I picked out for today are specifically, they have a specific line of sight directly to our gaming tables. These are good military history books for a military historical gamer. So you may already have some of these. If you don't have them, you may have heard of them. So yeah, I just hope that this content's a little bit helpful. Let me check out the channel here. Let's see what we got going on here. Yes, it would not be a stream without some technical issues. We have had some technical issues this morning, or this evening, surprise, surprise. We are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube. For some reason, we're not live on Twitch right now. There seems to be something up with our stream key. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but we're definitely up and going fine on YouTube, and we seem to have something, we seem to be doing okay on Facebook. Something's up with Twitch. Our chat is running fine, it's just not playing our video. It says we're offline, so I don't really know what's up with that. But anyway, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so the first book on today's recommended reading list. You may have heard of it, a lot of you may already have it. I almost guarantee you've seen the movie. And that book is Michael Shara's The Killer Angels. It's a short little book. It's like 320 pages, and it's not even like terribly small print or anything. It's almost a novella more than a novel. This is of course the novel that the movie Gettysburg is based off of, almost line for line. This is because it's a very short book, and when you take a book and you literally write your screenplay almost line for line out of the book, you wind up with a 4-hour and 20-minute movie. So most good movies that are based off of books are in fact not based off of books. They are based off of short stories or novellas. Killer Angels is more than a novella, but it is it's a really short novel. So this book, or this novel, obviously by Michael Shara, covers several characters going through the Battle of Gettysburg. The timeline starts about June 30th, 1863 in the American Civil War. Southern Maryland, as the armies are moving into southern Pennsylvania, and then it goes into how the battle kind of gets started, and then gives you some nice, right over the muzzle kind of a viewpoint on some of the, more important actions in the Battle of Gettysburg. It doesn't cover the entire battle. It's not a documentary. It is a historical drama. It sort of makes novel. It doesn't so much as fictionalize them. They do take a little bit of liberty in some spots, especially the movie. The novel's a little bit more faithful to the way the men really were, as far as we can tell. But main characters include General Lee, General Longstreet, definitely my favorite American general, or my favorite general of the American Civil War. On the Union side, it doesn't really go into the top commanders, like it doesn't go into Meade or Hancock or any of that, but it does go into Joshua Chamberlain and his the guys in his unit, the 20th Maine, over there in I think it's 5th Corps, way over there on the Union left. So yeah, it's a great book. This guy, the way he writes, the way a battle looks, the way he likes a battle, the way he writes how a battle smells, and he can transition seamlessly from, you know, generally at the map table, actually letting you look over his shoulder and see how the whole battle is laid out. You get the general's perspective. You've got the bird's eye view. You know where all the corps are, all the divisions, all the artillery batteries, and then boom, 2 pages later, you've got your bayonet in somebody's guts. Especially when you get into the action on the 2nd July Battle of Little Round Top. So it really gives you a spectrum. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, Michael Shara is no longer with us. His son, Jeff Shara, wrote the sequel and prequel to this novel that subsequent movies were then based off of, as well as a whole line of novels based on the American Revolution and stuff like that. But this is the original. This is the classic. The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. Read this book and kind of really digest it, and you're going to get, again, because of that dual perspective, you're going to get a really good look at how Civil War battles worked. Again, that's from the general's perspective, especially Longstreet and Lee. And then you're going to get from Chamberlain's perspective, and then, you know, the men that fought for him and worked for him. You're going to get how a Civil War battle felt. So this is really important, I think, for a gamer, because again, with one novel, again, it's not a textbook. You're not reading through charts and organizational tables and timelines and chronologies and numbers and facts and figures. It's a novel, and it is a brilliantly written novel. You're gonna pick this up. You're gonna get through your first cup of coffee. You're gonna be on page 338 before you know it. It reads like that, and when you get done with it, you're not really going to be an expert, but you have my promise. You are going to be conversant in the American Civil War. You're going to be able to stand toe to toe with any grognard at any convention and hold your own. If you're going to read one book about the American Civil War, make it this one. Do yourself a favor. So that takes care of that one. We'll check the comments before we go to Lieutenant Colonel Blake. Come on, man, don't compare me to Lieutenant Colonel Blake. I prefer Colonel Potter, but hey, no, we're talking about the rank insignia behind my shoulder there. Okay, so that's the Killer Angels. Definitely recommend it. Okay, sticking with some black powder, we then come to, oh god, okay, a narrative of a revolutionary soldier is the short version of this book. The complete title to this novel, it's not really a novel, it's just an account. The complete title to this narrative is, quote, a narrative of a revolutionary soldier, some of the adventures, dangers, and sufferings of Joseph Plum Martin. I say that 10 times fast. People just often call, Joseph Plum Martin's or Martin's narrative. This one is priceless, and I say that deliberately because it's literally one of a kind. It is the one and only book to first-hand direct account that comes from a Continental soldier out of the American Revolution. A lot of the leaders and generals would write essays and letters and newspaper articles or gazettes, some of the periodicals that they had at the time. Of course, they have their own memoirs here and there, but this is the only guy who was there in the ship, who actually took time later in his life to write out what he experienced. He starts off as a 15-year-old private. He's from Connecticut. He joins up for 6 months in the summer of 1776, so he's there at the birth of the nation, literally. He signs up for 6 months. His first battle is the Battle of Long Island. He damn near gets killed there because Long Island was kind of a disaster. And it just keeps going and going and going. He winds up as a sergeant of engineers, I think, and he's there when Lafayette and Hamilton charge the two British redoubts on the southern shoulder at Yorktown. So he's there he misses the initial campaign at Boston in late 75 and early 76, but other than that, he's there from beginning to end. When I say he's there, again, bayonet point view. He doesn't really pull any punches. He talks about all the stuff that he went through, especially between the battles, not just during the battles. You got to remember, guys, when you're a private in the army or in any kind of a military branch, you don't know what the hell's going on. So he does not pause to say, and the next day we went to Germantown. Washington deployed Sterling's division on the right, and he deployed Greene's division on the left. No. We were scared shitless. A cannonball went over the head, took this dude's head off. We all shit our britches. We kept going anyway. And damn, I was really hungry because I hadn't eaten in 3 days. My feet hurt because my shoes had fallen off by now. They had disintegrated off of my feet. And he talks about how he stays fed. He talks about how he tries to keep clothes on his back. Outside of the combat and outside of the sharper edge of some of the things that he went through, the starvation, the disease, and stuff like that. One thing that I found going through this book that I found particularly fun or whatever, telling, is how much being in the military hasn't changed. So I was in the military in the 80s and 90s. Everybody on the Sitrep team, that Sitrep command team, has been in the military at one time or another. Different armies, different branches, different nations. One is still in service. Gaz over there in the UK is, working in government service to this day. And it's amazing how much hasn't changed. I'm not kidding. Some of the guys just spent how much effort these guys spend just trying to get a drink, or they get in a fist fight. One of the guys in their squad gets a fist fight, and they take extra precaution to put him in the back of the formation, morning reveille, so the lieutenant doesn't see the black eye he's got. I'm like, dude, I remember doing that. It was in Hilton Head, South Carolina, as opposed to Elizabethtown, New Jersey, and it was in 1992 instead of 1777. But we used to pull some of the same shit. Of course, I'm not going to try to say that anything I went through or we go through is anything like what these guys went through. But it's amazing how much military service never really changes. So if you're interested in the American Revolution, this is a book you've got to read. Period. Because there is no other book like it. Again, it's not very long. Books weren't very long back in the day. They had to write it all out with a quill pen. But it's a great book, and it kind of tells you from the privates, corporals, and sergeants' perspective how the American Revolution really went down. So between each book, I'm going to check out Mr. Chat here. Killer Angels. Oh, cool. Thanks very much, Shen, for putting in the titles. I do appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you. Alrighty. Cool. That's a great idea, John. I appreciate it. I should have given you this list ahead of time. Okay, here is another one. We're going to take a look. Again, some of these books are not in the best physical condition, but you get the idea. This is a Harold Coyle novel. We all know who Harold Coyle is. Everyone's played Team Yankee. Everyone loves Team Yankee. Team Yankee. I've got Team Yankee running that book over there. I did not add it to my list because, let's face it, we all have it. Or we've all read it, or we've all played Team Yankee the game, which... the thing is, that was Harold Coyle's first book. And as good as it is, it was his first book. So he was kind of cutting his teeth on that one. He then came out with a bunch of other books, some of which are really important or can be really useful to a gamer if you're tired of, oh my god, West Germany against the Russians, a war that never was, over and over and over again. Sword Point is another war that never was, obviously, but it's basically Team Yankee in the deserts of Iran. It's not a sequel. It doesn't take place in the same cinematic universe as Team Yankee. It might as well, though. It's sometime in the late 80s, early 90s. Pretty much Desert Storm time, except this is before Desert Storm happened, and so what you're left with is again, Americans versus Soviets in Iran. The broad strokes of the plot are, and again, I won't spoil anything because I want you guys to read these books. The broad strokes of the plot are fundamentalist Shiite terrorists out of Tehran in Iran, obviously, set off a small nuke. I think it's in Kiev. It might be Kharkov. It might be Minsk. It's somewhere in southern Russia. And the Russians say, "What the hell dealt with that. And, you know, for reasons that, you know, again, I'm not 100% sure of the details. Long story short, there you go. They invade Iran from the north. And the Americans can't have it because they're not going to have the Soviets, the Cold War Soviets, with literal tanks parked on the side of the Persian Gulf. So the Americans go in, they meet in the middle, and there's these huge tank battles. It's basically Team Yankee, except it's in the deserts of Iran. The other book, which I don't have a physical copy of right in front of me, is Bright Star. Again, I think it's the second or the third novel. I can't remember which comes first, or Sword Point or Bright Star. They're all independent, so they're not like sequels that lead into each other. Bright Star is named after the Bright Star exercises that the American military holds with the Egyptian military, at least as late as 2019. I may be slightly out of date. I think they still hold them to this day. But they had them as late as 2019, to my knowledge. Big joint exercises with Egypt. They're a huge military defense partner that we have in the region. Even after the uprisings that we saw in the fall of the Mubarak regime with Arab Spring, I think in 2011. So, yeah, Egypt is huge in that region. The Arab-Israeli wars basically stopped as soon as Egypt lost interest. Syria can make all the noise they want. Iraq can make all the noise they want. Jordan never really wanted to get involved in the first place. Lebanon, I mean, come on. Lebanon's not really an issue to the Israelis. The only ones the Israelis are really worried about, outside of, you know, Iran getting a nuclear weapon or something, is Egypt. So, yeah, Bright Star is another one you want to check out. This is if you play Team Yankee or any other modern armor game, and you want to like kind of break out of the done to death West Germany, you know, thing. Again, there's still theoretical wars, so you're still free historically to do what you want. Same great author. In fact, if anything, he gets better as he goes, as most of us do as we practice. Yeah, Sword Point by Harold Coyle, or also Bright Star is the other kind of companion novel to this. Hello, crew. Okay, so I got to catch up with the chat here and refresh my YouTube page. Oh no, I hope I didn't just lose a bunch of comments there. Okay, so let me try and catch up on Mr. Chat here. Okay, so Vorprobite asks about pre-painted. I'm never going to paint again. Oh, Vorprobite, we all say that at least once a month. In my case, once a week. No, I'm just kidding. We all deal with hobby burnout, that's for sure. Yeah, painting miniatures is not required for wargaming, folks. I've been beating on that drum since I got here. So the question was about ACW pre-paints for Warlord. Actually, Bill, what was the ACW? They weren't exactly pre-painted, but they were like cast in gray and blue. I don't remember if those weren't Warlord, were they? That gigantic ACW. Oh my God, are we up on Twitch? Excuse me 1 second, guys. I have to take this. Oh man. So now we're gonna have like half a stream on Sitrep. I mean on Twitch. No worries. "60 years old, I am fed up with cheapskate gamers." Amen. Amen, Vorpal. I hear you. I hear you. I'm not with you on 60mm Vietnam War. 60mm is a huge scale. I love playing Vietnam War. I do Vietnam in either hex encounters or squad or platoon level, or 15mm. I basically play a bastardized mix of Flames of War Nam, or nowadays Team Yankee Nam, and Force on Force. That's how I run most of my Vietnam, but that's only in 15mm. Because I like big games. Okay, cool. We're up on Twitch. Thanks very much. I will open up Twitch as well. Give me 1 second, guys. We're having a little bit of, not technical issues, technical recovery from previous technical issues. Just in case we get comments on Twitch, I don't want to miss it. Thank you very much for that support. I super appreciate it. Bill, cool. Yeah, I hit the stream key and we went live on 2 channels, just not on the 3rd one for some reason. Vorpalbite says, in Europe, the miniature tables look like a museum display. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't like to play on museum displays. And in America, not capitalized, the gamers slop any old junk on their tables. Well, stop playing with miniatures. They're, good game. The better games don't use miniatures at all. I mean, everyone knows that. How big is the scale for your biggest infantry on the shelf? My biggest miniatures are 28s, which, quite honestly, were given to me. They're great miniatures. I have found that I actually do enjoy playing 28mm infantry. I don't like painting 28mm vehicles. It's not so much fun. Johnny Grogan, hello. Wow, see, now we got tons of comments because we actually have all of our channels up. Cool, thanks again for that, Bill. All right, let's keep going, guys. Let me get some tea here, and then we'll keep going. So again, for people just joining us, again, this isn't like going to be a common thing. We're just trying something out new here on a random Wednesday. We are going through Oriskany's recommended reading list. Books that are obviously about military history to one degree or another. Technically, Sword Point is not military history. It never happened, thank God. But military history books that have a line of sight, that have a connection to the gaming table. There's a reason that if you play a certain genre of history, a certain period of history, you may want to pick one of these books up if you haven't already. Spoiler alert, if you're into Team Yankee, you probably already have Sword Point. And if you don't, you really should kind of get on that. This is how you play Team Yankee out of Germany. You play Team Yankee in other parts of the world. Again, same writer, Harold Coyle. Kind of a better novelist by that point because it wasn't his first novel anymore. He made up his own background, whereas in Team Yankee he was borrowing somebody else's. Yeah, so those are those first three. We've looked so far at Sword Point by Harold Coyle, Narrative of a Revolutionary Soldier by the unique and awesome Joseph Plum Martin, the only complete narrative to come out of the American Revolution written by a Continental soldier, and of course The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. Legend, Michael Shara. Nothing against his son. His son is, carrying the torch forward, but yeah, Michael Shara is the man. Especially his book, The Killer Angels, absolutely unmatched. And that's of course what the movie Gettysburg is based on. You want to know how the American Civil War worked, and you want to, especially at the operational, not really the strategic level. President Lincoln is not a character in the book. But if you want to know how the American Civil War worked on the battlefield, the operational level, and also down obviously to the tactical bayonet point level, that book is indispensable. That one book will make you conversant in the American Civil War right there. Okay, this book has a terrible cover. In fact, it doesn't have a front cover at all. I think I got this at a reclaimed bookstore somewhere. So again, I really apologize I don't have a book for it, but I'll show you the back. And the spine. I have crowed and wept and lavished praise and everything else about this book 100 times before. You can see how many times I've read it. It's literally falling apart. It is probably, to my knowledge, I don't pretend to have read everything. First of all, Tom Clancy, hold my beer. Seriously, hold my friggin' beer. Okay, Ralph Peters, I don't know if you agree with him politically. He's kind of gotten into the political arena in more recent years. But as a novelist and as an expert on what he's talking about, again, he's got more, he packs more into 3 pages of this book than you'll get in 600 pages of Red Storm Rising. It's Team Yankee, basically. The Soviets are invading West Germany, with 2 important differences. This one's written entirely from the Soviet perspective. If you play a Soviet force, if your opponent plays a Soviet force, if you guys have, which almost everybody has to in your group somewhere, otherwise what are you going to do? Play against yourself? If you want to figure out how the Russian army worked, or I should say the Soviet army, the Cold War Soviet army worked, how it felt, how it was put together, And again, this is one of those great books where the guy where the writer can seamlessly go from, I think the character's name is General Walensky. He commands the First Western Front. He's the guy going right through the British in the North German Plain. Hamburg, Hanover, and the Weser River are his big objectives. That's kind of where this game takes place, or where this book takes place. Yeah, it's Team Yankee, except told from the Soviet perspective, and I should say it's more like Red Storm Rising, told from the Soviet perspective. Because again, it also goes operational. There's a 5-star general that's a character in the book, really a 4-star general that's a character in the book. Down through, he's got 3rd Shock Army's commander is a character in the book. 2nd Tank Army commander is a character in the book briefly before he gets shot down by his own anti-aircraft. Spoilers. Down to some guards colonels, a lieutenant colonel of a forward maneuver group of a Soviet tank division, all the way down to a private, like a 17-year-old private who barely knows which end of the AK-47 goes forward. Yeah, so it goes from the buck private up to a 4-star general, and it does all of them perfectly. Again, I wish I had a better copy of it, because I know I'm making it look like a piece of shit here, but I almost want to turn my webcam around and show you all of my books or whatever, but when it comes to military novels, it's a tough call. It really is. The 2 best ever written. And I say that with every friggin' awareness. Red Storm Rising, I wouldn't wipe my ass with Red Storm Rising. Sorry, Tom Clancy. He really didn't know what he was talking about when he wrote that book. He knew what he was talking about when he wrote Hunt for Red October. That's because Larry Bond was writing most of that book for him. I think Tom Clancy learned a little bit as he went, but early in his career, he needed a lot of help, and you can tell when he didn't have it. First of all, he has World War III lasting like 36 days. What's the weather like on your planet? In Red Army, I won't say who wins, but it doesn't last all the way through day 3 before decisions are made. Absolutely fantastic book. The best perspective of what a battle looks like, smells like, feels like, from the pit of your stomach to the blood in your eyes. He's an absolutely amazing writer. I've read a lot of his other books. He's branched out into other genres, or I should say other periods of military history. One of the best out there. Ralph Peters, Red Army. If you play Team Yankee, if you play pretty much any force in any genre that has an opposition force, that has an actual enemy, we all have to have an enemy on our table or else we don't have the game. And it's not an insurgent force. Pretty much if you have Russians. If you have Russians in your modern game and you don't have this book, I don't know what to tell you. Red Army by Ralph Peters. I'm not kidding. Here's another book that you really need to have. If you don't, shame on you. I'm just kidding, but not really. This is another one that's really a must for any kind of a modern mechanized Team Yankee kind of a battle. Excuse me. If you play Team Yankee, Oil Wars, if you play GHQ, Micro Armor, pretty much anything that involves vehicles, tanks, in a post-1945 setting, you've got to read this book, straight out. You have to own this book. Like I said in episode 3 of Op Center, if you play, Team Yankee, Fate of a Nation, or Oil Wars, anything like that, and you don't own this book, buy this book on Amazon and read it 3 times and sleep with it under your pillow. Okay, I should probably introduce the book. This is the Avigdor Kahalani's Heights of Courage. This guy's the real fucking deal. Alright, sorry for the F-bomb, but he's the real deal. He is more Patton than Patton. He is more Rommel than Rommel. He is more Katakov than Katakov. This guy is one of the premier tank commanders that has ever lived. And I say that again with all awareness. He was in the 67, 73, and 82 wars. He was a captain commanding a company of M48A2s, or A3s, A2s in the Sinai in 67 through the Gerati Pass. Got wounded pretty badly. I think it was the hydraulic fluid in his pad caught fire. And I mean, he made it out of the tank, but yeah. By the time he come to 73, he's now a lieutenant colonel. He commands 77th Tank Battalion, 7th Armored Brigade. He's stationed on the Golan Heights, hence the Heights of Courage. This guy fought for 3 days against the bulk of Syrian 1st, Syrian 3rd, and Syrian 9th Infantry Divisions, something like that. At times, his battalion was outnumbered 15 to 1. And he was one of the only units that really held the whole northern wing of the Israeli army together. In the only Arab-Israeli war that, number one, the Israelis didn't start, sorry, and number two, that the Israelis legit almost lost. When I say the only one that the Israelis didn't start, I'm kind of leaving out the 78 war, the 48 War of Independence. But as far as the 56, 67, 73, 82, 2006, 2009, all the classic Arab-Israeli wars, the Israelis always strike first. And that's not a condemnation on their foreign policy or anything like that. It's just, if you really want to win a war, hit first. Never mind about being a good guy. You've already made that decision when you made the decision to go to war. Hit first. Don't let the enemy hit you first. This is the one time the Israelis got hit first, and he's one of the guys that really pulled it out. So he writes like everything that happened to him and his men through those days, including the original call-up in amazing detail. This guy walked away with the Medal of Valor. That's Israel's either Victoria Cross or Congressional Medal of Honor. So I'll just go ahead and let that stand for itself. By 1982, he was, I think, a brigadier general. He had a whole division going up into Lebanon, where things actually didn't go so well for him. But 73, this man is the man right here. Okay, this is the guy that, if you open up the foreword to Team Yankee, you'll read where Harold Coyle shamelessly lifts whole chapters out of this thing and says that this happened to my fictional Americans in Germany as they tried to hold back waves of Soviet armor the way these guys held back waves of Syrian armor in the battle that history calls the Valley of Tears. This is the guy who gave the Valley of Tears its name. Absolute, a tank badass to the nth degree, and he wrote it all down. So again, if you want to get a look at how tank warfare really works in the modern era, this guy's been there in a way that just about nobody else really ever has. All right, I will now check Mr. Comment. Hello, Dennis. Hello, Dennis. Welcome to the chat. Oh no, what's going on here? It's the ever lovable, world famous, oh my god, U.S. Marine Corps Sitrep historian, big ol' Oriskany himself. I do my best. Dennis, thank you for coming out. Thanks very much. Dennis says, I have that book. It's great. I wish I was watching the chat where I'm assuming you're talking about Heights of Courage. Yeah, it's insane. It's literally crazy. Number 5, Heights of Courage by Avigdor Kahalani. Awesome. Arab-Israeli was the time period I almost selected, but Vietnam won out. I like Arab-Israeli wars. I've got the game right back here by Avalon Hill. It's my favorite Avalon Hill game. It's the, in fact, I got my big grape in the middle of the way here. Heights of Courage. This is, okay, so Panzer Leader turned into, I should say Panzer Blitz was the first one, turns into Panzer Leader. Panzer Leader evolves into Arab-Israeli wars. Almost everybody who plays anything like Panzer Leader nowadays, they may have German counters and American counters and Soviet counters and British counters. They're playing Arab-Israeli wars, because that's when they finally got the rules right. As far as why I really like the Arab-Israeli wars, this is the one. This may sound kind of cheesy, but as far as like a period goes, it's one of the very few times in military history where the elite outnumbered. This is going to sound weird, so bear with me. It's one of the few times in military history, I mean pre-1990s, like not like super modern, but before that, in modern-ish military history, where the outnumbered, better soldiers with the better technology and the better gear and the better training and the better doctrine aren't actually the bad guys. So the smaller army with the better tanks and the better training and the better officers and the better doctrine and the better training, these are the Germans in World War II. These are the Germans in World War I. These are the Confederates in the American Civil War. To try to find a war where the, again, huge air quotes here, good guys are not the big bumbling conscript army that gets the ever-living shit kicked out of it for 4 years before finally figuring out which end is up. That's the Americans in World War II. That's definitely the British in World War II. That's hell yeah, the Russians in World War II. It's the Allies in World War I. It's the Federals and the American Civil War. In order to play the better side, you almost have to usually play the air quotes bad guys. Which again, it doesn't really matter in a war game. It's just two sides and two friends having a game. But it's neat to just once in a while get to play the outnumbered, outnumbered but not outgunned, badasses, especially in a mechanized kind of a game. Yeah, that's kind of the Israelis in the Arab-Israeli wars. Backs to the wall. You are outnumbered 10-1. God help you. But here's the good news: you've got all the better equipment, better tanks, better air support, better officers, better doctrine, better gunners. That's usually the enemy in history, if you take an objective look at it. That's changed a little bit in the last 20 years when warfare has gone completely asymmetrical, and you've got all these tier 1 operators in Iraq and Afghanistan and even Syria, fighting hordes of enemy insurgents. Okay, now the good guys are once again the outnumbered, backs to the wall. Here we go. We have to defeat this huge, force of, historical orcs, to use a very broad term, in a wargaming sense. I'm dropping a 40K reference here, everybody. I'm not making any kind of a, statement. A huge force of badly trained irregulars. Outside of that kind of, tier 1 operator special forces stuff, which I don't actually really get into, I'm much more of a, fabric and fundamentals military. I want, battalions and brigades and, an actual battlefield. That's usually the bad guys are the better force. Arab-Israeli wars is one of the few times when the better side is also, at least usually, the good side. Again, I'm speaking very broadly there. So that's why I picked Arab-Israeli wars, although I also do Vietnam. Vietnam, believe it or not, the Americans usually outnumbered the Viet Cong. Not many people know that. Okay, guys, we're halfway through it. I don't want the stream to last all night here, so I'll go a little bit faster. How about Red Badge of Courage? Red Badge of Courage is a great point. Number one, I don't have a copy of Red Badge of Courage with me, and I didn't want to pile on too much American Civil War stuff. Red Badge of Courage is also a much older novel. So I also picked. Okay, so is Red Badge of Courage an awesome novel? Absolutely. I'm not gonna go against those. That's Stephen Crane. I picked the Killer Angels because unlike, I should say, what Killer Angels has that Red Badge of Courage doesn't have, again, I'm looking for a gaming perspective, I'm looking for a wargaming angle here, is the characters. The characters in Killer Angels do have characters like we see in Red Badge of Courage. Guys that are lost in the woods, where the hell, all I see is white musket smoke. Holy crap, there's a rebel on the end of my bayonet, stuff like that. However, this book has characters on both sides, number one, and number two, this book has characters like Lee and Longstreet, who are looking at the general's table and kind of, showing the battle's broader view. So you get a gaming perspective where if you like a big game, if you like a small game, you want to know what's really going on, you want to know the situation for a given battle, like obviously Gettysburg. Red Badge of Courage doesn't have that. You almost have to be a military historian to figure out what battle they're even talking about. By the way, it's Chancellorsville, which is right before this. It's the battle immediately preceding Gettysburg. So that's the only reason I picked that. I mean, am I going to say that, Red Badge of Courage is not a great novel. Absolutely. Calling out to my 75th Ranger Regiment and 12th and 7th Special Forces Group. Absolutely. This is where, again, the good guys are, again, the outnumbered heroes. But, before we get into too much Special Forces, the ultra-modern period of warfare, especially if you're like me, you like mechanized actual battlefield kind of stuff, as opposed to more covert operations. Yeah, it's Arabs Relay Wars, really. And Gulf War, but good God, we've done enough Gulf War lately, so. I wanted to create 60mm battle where the Americans have to rescue the embassy hostages in Iran in 1980. That would definitely be. So you're basically going to try and redo Operation Eagle Claw. Vorpal Buddy is what you're saying. Have I ever read any of the books of Springtime by Tom Cooper? No, I have not. I am unfamiliar with that writer, to be perfectly honest. What else is going on here? Have I read The War 2020 by Ralph Peters? You had to mention that, didn't you? You had to mention that one. As in the one bad thing Ralph Peters ever wrote. I tried. I think I still have a copy of it somewhere. I got to get back to it. Of course, this is back when 2020 was the distant future. I think that book came out in like 1992 or something. So I'll have to check that one out again. Vorpal Bite says Panzerbusch. Yes, Vorpal Bite. Panzerbusch is the derogatory, slanderous word that people used to use toward Panzer Blitz, because Panzer Blitz totally deserved it. The terrain rules were broken. They made opportunity fire an optional rule. So if you did not use optional rules, which most people in most tournaments don't use optional rules, they just use the gospel and verse rules right out of the book, the game gets completely absurd. And that's where it gets the term Panzerbusch from. Panzer Blitz, Panzer Leader fixes it to a certain degree, and by the time you get to Arab Israeli Wars, yeah, that stuff is done. That stuff is fixed. So, yeah, don't worry about that. But Panzerbusch, yeah, it's definitely a rough ride. I played Johnny Reb. I've done Johnny Reb before. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, but yes, I've done Johnny Reb before. Sucker for reckless Confederate cavalry charge. Oh, reckless Confederate cavalry charge. Yeah, the couple times I played Johnny Reb, I wound up on the Federal side, and I didn't do too well because I didn't really understand black powder warfare in those days. It's not neat because it involves Japan and Russia. Yeah, I didn't like the characters. But again, I have to kind of get back in there and try it again. Given that it's Ralph Peters, and he's probably my favorite writer, it's Ralph Peters and Stephen Pressfield. In fact, as long as we're on the subject, in fact, I probably should have had that on my list. Stephen Pressfield's Gates of Fire. If you've ever read that filth that is that graphic novel 300, or have you ever seen that movie? I'm sorry, I had to choke down a little bit of vomit there in my throat. 300. You need to read Gates of Fire to wash that garbage out of your head. Never mind. Sorry. I'm not going to get it back on any kind of a soapbox or anything, but Gates of Fire is 300 done correctly. Trust me. In fact, when 300 first came out, I thought it was based on Gates of Fire. I was like, oh my god, they finally made a movie based on a good book. No, it's based on a comic book. Nothing against graphic novels, but they're glorified comic books. They're not good historical references, like, at all. And the movie shows it. Nothing. The one thing that the 300 movie got right is it did make the point that it wasn't just the 300. I think there were like 400 or 4,000 other Greeks in there with them. And the whole idea that the 300 didn't really get dislodged from their place until they were outflanked, they were betrayed and outflanked, is also true. Those are really the only two historical facts in that movie. Everything else is just the way the people look, the way they're dressed, the way they move, the way they fight, the way they it's steaming trash. Now, anyway, add that unofficially to the list. Stephen Pressfield's Gates of Fire is 300 done the right way. Okay, we're like getting behind schedule here, so let's hurry it up a little bit. Springtime. Tim Cooper has written books on aviation, such as the Iranian F-14As in combat. Yeah, we sold the Shah of Iran, or gave the Shah of Iran, a fleet of, I can't remember how many it was, F-14s. And the 1973 average relay war. Oh, almost anything about 1973 October War I will read at least once. That's one of my favorite wars in history. Is Yom Kippur, Ramadan, October War. Pick your, depending on your political political outlook. I would love a good naval battle game. Fond memories of playing Avalon Hill's Midway. Midway, I remember it Midway. I definitely have fond memories of playing it. I don't know how good of a naval war game it was. It was exceedingly simple, but yeah, I definitely used to. I don't have it anymore, but I definitely used to have that game way back in the day. Sounds like a new show. Oriskany reviews historical movies. No, we're not doing that, because I will lose my shit every time, and everyone will stop watching us. And, and plus, there's guys out there that do it already. They don't really do it from a war gaming perspective, but like these, internet movie historian guys, they're out there and they're not bad. They're not great, but they're not bad. They pick us. There are a couple good ones, and they do pick some pretty good movies. They don't pick the bad ones. They tend to pick the good ones and just kind of point out what's right, as opposed to picking out movies like The Patriot or 300 or Pearl Harbor and just absolutely ripping them to shreds. But anyway, we're now off track for like the 7th time. No, it would be hilarious. Bill's trying to kill me. Bill's trying to put me into a mental institution by the time I hit 50. It's not going to happen. I will keep my balance. Okay, sorry, I've gone off the track like 7 times now. Patriot Battles by Michael Stevenson. Okay, so this is the second American Revolutionary War book that we've talked about. The reason I wanted 2 in here is, this is the narrative of Joseph Plum Martin. Obviously, it's from the American perspective. Surprise, surprise. And it talks a great deal about how the war kind of felt, how it worked. Not really how it worked, how it felt, how it looked, how it smelt, things like that. A guy who walked through the whole war. Again, he was in probably the last bayonet charge of the war. He was with Marquis de Lafayette and Alexander Hamilton, the guy on the $10 bill, as they launched that last nighttime bayonet charge against Redoubt number 10, I think it was, on the south shoulder of the Yorktown pocket during the siege of Yorktown. And he started off at the Battle of Long Island in August of 75. So again, this is a peerless book. Literally, there is no other book written like this. Only one narrative came out of the American Revolution. This is it. Not a very big book either. We're lucky we got this much. He finally wrote this in like 1850 when he was like 92 years old or something. But the reason I picked this book by Michael Stevenson is, the subtitle is How the War of Independence Was Fought. And you can see where I've got this all dog-eared and I got no tags in here. This guy goes into, it's not a history of the American Revolution. This is why I recommend it for gamers interested in the American Revolution. It's not a history. The Battle of Long Island, the British won, and here's how they outflanked. No, it's much more, this is how an American regiment was put together. It was a color sergeant. It was usually commanded by a major or a lieutenant colonel, and then it went down to this, and there were so many companies, and there were usually 45 men in the company. It was supposed to have 80 plus a drummer plus 2 corporals plus a sergeant. It gets into that kind of detail, and it does it for the British too. So Joseph Plum Martin obviously is all American perspective, all Patriot perspective. This also goes into the British. It talks about details as small as, well, a British regiment of the line at the time was supposed to have 10 companies. 10 companies of 8, or out of those 10 companies, 8 of them are line infantry. One of them is light, one of them is grenadiers. You're supposed to have 56 bayonets in a company. However, there's so many excuse me. There are so many files and there's so many men in a file, you wind up with like 52 men or something like that. Those remaining 4 men were ghosts on the payroll, and the regiment or the company would collect the pay of those 4 non-existent men and then use that as a discretionary fund to buy boots and buckles, and it goes into that kind of detail. How these armies are put together, how they operated, how they fought, how the different generals really viewed the problems that they were facing, especially George Washington. It takes a pretty harsh view on Washington, exposing him to be an operational mastermind and a tactical kind of a doofus. He gets outflanked at the Battle of Brandywine. At Long Island, he gets outflanked twice. At Germantown, he outflanks himself. So, yeah, and it goes into that for several of the generals. Where the lines were drawn when it comes to profiteering, which was very murky in those days, the kind of thing that went down with Benedict Arnold and some of the reasons he really wound up flipping and joining the enemy side, the different kinds of artillery and how they were dragged around and how they were organized into the armies. Again, how supply worked, how weapons were manufactured, where they actually came from. So this would be really interesting if you were into skirmish, Revolutionary War stuff, almost down into role-playing. It gets down into some real, belt buckle level, nitty-gritty detail. So definitely recommend it. And it's in these great chapters, because it's not a novel. It's an actual textbook. It's a nonfiction book. So to read the whole thing cover to cover might be a touch much at first. Okay, we've got just a couple books left. Let me check the chat here. Hello, Brother Ben. How you doing? Uh-oh. Springtime is in the Amazon cart here. Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden. Sitrep podcast, Bill, that is an excellent edition. That is an excellent edition. Black Hawk Down is what Bill mentions. That's Mark Bowden's book. He's also the guy who wrote Killing Pablo. In fact, that's how he got started on Killing Pablo, as he was writing Black Hawk Down. And then when he was talking to one of the Delta operators that still hasn't been officially named, he saw a picture up on the wall. It was an actual photograph of Pablo Escobar, his fat ass lying up there on that rooftop, with a bunch of people posing around him like they just shot a moose up in the, Montana Rockies somewhere. And that's how he got kind of into it. Unlike a lot of books that are written about that kind of thing, Black Hawk Down, The Battle of Mogadishu, is actually a pretty solid one. Right, so I would definitely agree that that's definitely an awesome book. How much wargaming perspective it has, or application it has, that's kind of why it doesn't make the list. Also, I don't have a copy of it here with me. I'm not sure how useful it might be outside of Mogadishu. As far as how American Spec Ops was working in the 90s, it probably gives you some good insight into that. But if you get into that 1990s era between the end of the Cold War, during the Cold War, American Special Forces operated very differently than they operated after that, and before 9/11, where again there was a big change in mission and scope and how often they were deployed, and things really kicked off, obviously, for Special Forces after 9/11. So between those two events, between 1991 and 2001, is kind of an interesting period. We've got, good God, where were we? Somalia, obviously, Haiti, all up and down the Balkans, Kosovo. Special Forces was involved in all that, obviously. So if that's, if you're interested in that, that book might definitely be very useful. Okay, this book is in pretty good shape. I just don't have a good cover image. This is War on the Eastern Front by James Lucas. So, again, I don't know if I'm holding up to the camera that would be worth anything. Yeah, so War on the Eastern Front by James Lucas, 1941 to 45. This is almost an anthology of battle reports, letters home, diary entries, unit diaries, There's even a letter written by a chaplain in here, all German, and all. There's one tiny exception. There's a dot of Russian in here, but it's 99% German. And again, it's not a litany of battles. It doesn't say, oh, Barbarossa kicked off at 3:45 a.m., 22 June 1941. Army Group North was commanded by List. In the center we had Bach, in the south we had Winstead. It doesn't go through all of that. Trust me, there are books for that. This doesn't go into that. It just goes into, okay, this is how the Germans' army was put together. Again, if you're going to play a German force on the Eastern Front, you really should check out this book. Like what their experience was, how their force was put together. There is one chapter in here about the greatest Stug ace in history. That's my boy Hugo Primojic, if I even pronounce his name correctly. Let's see if I can get that up to the camera. Germany's most successful self-propelled SP fighter. We're talking about self-propelled guns. That's basically Stugs in Russia, and it's a blow-by-blow account of him sitting up on a ridgeline. I think he kills like 30 T-34s that day by himself. Absolutely insane stuff like that. There's one chapter in here where the Germans, I think it's Ukrainian partisans, have blown up a bridge across the Dnieper River, and the German engineers are trying to build a bridge, trying to lead towards Stalingrad to help the guys out that are trapped in that pocket there. They have to build a railroad bridge, a 4-line railroad bridge across the river that at that latitude is about a mile, about a kilometer across. They don't have any building materials, so they build it out of ice. They build an ice bridge with bricks and blocks, and they have hoses that are pumping water out of the Dnieper River, and that's how they're welding these blocks together. And it goes into it's the engineer's report. They're like, well, we put together so many laborers and so many engineers, and we cut our blocks 6 feet by 4 feet. There are excerpts of German what's the word I'm looking for here? Training manuals, where it teaches Germans how to keep your boots dry, how to build an igloo. Believe it or not, that's in here. Russia gets pretty cold, in case you might not be familiar. And again, it's got little episodes and anecdotes, and it goes from the beginning of the war in 41 to some of the last tank-on-tank action in April of 45, right outside the gates of Berlin. So again, if you play a German army in the East, definitely buy this book. Even if you don't, it gives you an idea of what it was actually like to fight in World War II, from like under the helmet kind of a viewpoint. All right, this is my boy Philip Sabine, if I'm saying his name correctly. Again, I wish I kept more of the dust covers for these books. This one here is not about military history, really. It's about war game design. This is a book about how to design a war game. And we're not talking about bolt action here. We're not talking about Flames of War. We're talking about serious war games. The guy is a little pompous, but he does know his shit. He's a university professor. I can't remember exactly where. I'm not going to look it up now because again I don't have the dust cover. London somewhere. So I don't know exactly what university he teaches in. I have to look that up again. And he has sort of made a career out of using wargaming as an educational tool. So how to teach his students, not only, Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, it didn't go so well for him. He doesn't just go into facts and figures and dates. He also goes into, I'm going to build a game. I'm going to have the class build a game through the course of their semester. And at the end of that semester, we're going to try out their game and we're going to see what they've learned. Not only in what happened and what didn't happen, but why it happened. That's the main point, at least for me. Everyone's different, but at least for me, that's the main reason you play a war game. Why certain things happened, and if certain things had changed or had been done differently, would that have affected the results? Lots of people think that certain things, if someone had assassinated Hitler in 1939, nothing changes. I'm sorry, but nothing changes. What if Jackson hadn't died at Chancellorsville? Would Gettysburg have turned out differently? Yes, the Confederates would have lost even worse, most likely, for a variety of reasons that I won't really get into now. But there's a lot of, what's the word here? A lot of times people who play military war games are into alternate histories. And a way you can explore that is by not only playing war games, but by war game design. So everyone on Sitrep probably knows I'm big into war game design. That's a big part of my hobby, as opposed to painting and building miniatures. I want to know how the game works. I want to know why it works. I want to know what threads connect those rules decisions to the historical event. Why is the range so short? Why is the range so long? Why do the tank does it move so fast? And, I want to know how and why the historical game connects to the historical results. I want to see if we can build that thought experiment where, okay, I'm going to build a game and I'm going to recreate the Battle of Tarawa, and I'm going to run it exactly the way the Marines attacked that island 3 or 4 times, maybe 10 times, until, without trying to jinx the game, without kind of fudging the dice or anything stupid like that, until the game comes out almost perfectly like the historical event nearly every time if I make all the same decisions. And once I cut that rules engine built the way I like it, and the game is reliable, okay, now I'm going to step back. I'm going to play the game an 11th time, except I'm going to attack from the south. I'm going to attack against those other invasion beaches that the Marines didn't use. I'm going to bring Jackson to Gettysburg, which doesn't make that big of a difference personally. I mean, Jackson was, obviously a Confederate general, but when Jackson was in the Army and Longstreet was in the Confederate Army, Lee's whole army was divided into only 2 corps. When Jackson finally died at the end of Battle of Chancellorsville, Lee finally took the opportunity to divide his army into 3 corps. Obviously, Longstreet had the 1st, then we have Ewell's 2nd Corps and A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps. And that completely changes the dynamic of how the Army of Northern Virginia actually works. It can break up into 3 pieces instead of only 2. So, yeah, there's, little things like that. What if Napoleon had never gone into Russia? I won't go into all the scenarios because there's literally an infinite number. And again, just a well-designed war game. Miniatures are great, painting's great, all that stuff is great. A well-designed and well-researched war game that encourages you to make the same decisions, facing the same challenges organically, which most games don't do. They try to force it on you with special rules and addendums and expansions and stuff like that. But where doing certain things in your game makes sense for the same reasons that they did on the actual battlefield. Obviously in an academic, vicarious, and abstracted way. The same basic idea. That's what I'm really into. Looks like simulating war. Oh, sorry, I did not actually read that right. Yes, it's simulating war. Oh, yeah. Studying conflict. Hold on. Studying conflict through simulation games is the full title of the game. Philip Sabine. My only critique on this book is, just the way the guy writes. Yeah, I mean, I guess he's at the top of his game, and he's been there a while, because he knows it. He's probably the most polite way I can say that. But it's all good. All right, second to last one here. I'm going to go through this one super fast because we've talked about it a bunch already. This is the Third World War, August 1985, by General Sir John Hackett. If you have read Team Yankee, or if you've played Team Yankee, this is your cinematic universe. Team Yankee is not its own novel in a weird kind of way. So if you open up the Team Yankee and you actually start looking into the if you actually just start to read his forward, obviously he mentions the Heights of Courage, which I've already talked about. He also goes a great deal into the Third World War. So again, Team Yankee was Harold Coyle's first novel. He didn't want to create his own cinematic universe the first time out. He didn't sit down and try to invent the whole Third World War, why it happened, how it happened, where it was happening, anything like that. He said, you know what? A commanding general of NATO forces, this guy was in charge of all of NATO, he was a British general, all of NATO in the late 70s, or NATO ground forces, I think it was. could be wrong about that. He may have been overall NATO commander or just NATO ground forces. I'll have to look that up, so forgive me if I got that wrong. But this guy's pretty qualified. If you're in charge of NATO and you spend 5 years getting ready for the big show, and then afterwards you write a book about what might have happened if the Russians invade, outside of the political point he was trying to make here, he was trying to stimulate some government spending. Outside of that intentional bias, he's pretty much, a one-man show as far as your reference material. There weren't too many other people in history that have been more qualified to write this book than General Sir John Hackett. Now, again, so Team Yankee takes place in this cinematic universe. You look at Team Yankee, you read the foreword, he says, this is not my setting. I totally boosted this off of General Sir John Hackett. So, again, for Team Yankee players, especially if you play non-Americans, you play Germans, British, French, you play, who knows, what faction you play. If you play Russians, you got to read Red Army. We've already talked about that. If you play any other NATO power, you've got to read this book for Team Yankee, because this explains what else is going on in that universe. Team Yankee is about one team. It's about one company of American mixed arms, American company, hence team. One mechanized platoon and I think 2 tank platoons and a command element. So outside of that immediate couple kilometers, you never really know what's going on. That's how it is in combat. You have your mission and you try to focus on your mission. This guy takes the war to other theaters. He tells you what's going on in other parts of the world. There's a big war in South Africa, what's going on in Asia. And the way it's written, it's a novel, obviously, because this war obviously never happened. But it's written like it's written like a history book. It's written as if it's the year 2020 or 2021, and the Third World War happened 40 years ago. What that first history book out of World War III might have looked like. That's how it's written. Now, he did have to rewrite this a couple years later. This is the Third World War, The Untold Story, where he did make some changes, because obviously things change. So a little bit of the book is not entirely accurate, but that's because when he wrote the book, August 1985 was the far, far future. This book originally came out, I think, in 1977. So, you can be the most eminently qualified person on the planet to write that book, which at the time he arguably was. It's still really tough to see into the future, almost a decade. Okay, the last one we're going to do today is a book that, believe it or not, this is going to sound crazy, but believe it or not, this was actually recommended to me by a member of the On Tabletop team, Beasts of War in those days. This book was featured by John Lyons on one of the weekend shows, and the second I saw him talk about it, I knew I had to have this book. This has a great wargaming application if you're into larger battles. If you're a skirmish guy, if you're into your 28mm little submachine gun duels in the streets of Stalingrad, this might not be the book for you. But if you're into any kind of actual, large battles, or any kind of just studies about how that war actually went down, the World War II Data book by John Ellis. It's one of the few books I actually have a decent dust cover for. I wear the shit out of my books, guys. Do I read my books? I don't know. You tell me. They're all falling apart. But anyway, so yeah, this book almost doesn't have a word in it, believe it or not. It's all charts. It's all organizations of tables of organization and equipment. It's all orders of battle. It's how different armies were put together, like how many tank battalions are in the Soviet tank brigade. Do you know right now? Because I have to know. Trust me, if I put the wrong number of tank battalions into a Soviet tank brigade, someone's going to tell me. It happens to me almost every week. Or how many rifle companies go into a Soviet mechanized brigade? Not mechanized battalion, not motorized battalion, mechanized battalion. How many SMG companies, how many rifle companies, not guards. I'm talking about a regular mechanized, mechanized tank brigade. Or not tank brigade, just mechanized brigade. These are the kind of details that are in here. And of course it does it for all the factions. one of the most important little data charts in here, just to tell you the kind of detail this book goes into, and what kind of things it can kind of show you about how World War II actually kind of unfolds. Is it takes the German military, or at least their army and the Waffen-SS, and it charts out their effort almost like a labor sheet. It charts out their effort or their deployment by, like we have man hours in the workplace, like division months. It takes every single division that ever existed in the German army, that's well over 350, especially if you include late war brigades and the Waffen-SS and all that other stuff. And then it tracks how many months each one of those divisions, for however long it existed, not all the divisions were there the whole time, obviously, how many months each division was in, and it aggregates that all together by front. And it's like how many division months the Germans had in the Eastern Front, how many they had in the Balkans, how many they had in North Africa, in Northwest Europe, in Norway, and so on and so forth. It's scary. It's scary when you realize that 85% of World War II was fought by the Soviets. They won that war. Because the numbers don't lie. Britain put in the time. The Soviets paid the blood, and America picked up the check. That's World War II in a nutshell. And that's the kind of information that you're going to find in that book. How the armies were put together, where they were deployed, detailed orders of battle, casualty figures, attrition rates. If you get into the detailed data analysis of the Second World War, like I like to, it's part of my research. It's the stuff I gotta know, because if I don't, I'll hear about it in the YouTube comments. Trust me. That's a good book to have as a nice umbrella reference. Again, if you're into your skirmish games and your little 28mm bolt action stuff, just because of the small scale of those games, I'm not making fun of bolt action. This book might not be that useful to you, because this deals with divisions plural, and how they're put together, and how many of them were sent here, how many of them were sent there, how many ships it took to support them, who was in charge, who was in command, when did they get there, when did they leave, and stuff like that. So I will now check out the chat here. Oh my god, we got lots of comments here in the chart here. Oh my god. Looks like Simulating War, says Sitrep podcast. Yep. I want to collect. Okay, so Warper says, I'm going to catch up with the chat and then close out the stream for the night. I want to collect the classic battles: Thermopylae, Agincourt, Bull Run, Rorke's Drift, and the Alamo. Those are all definitely good battles. I'm not 100% sure how good a war game Thermopylae would be. You'd have to be careful about what level you played the game at, because it's literally a doorstop. The shape of the coastline in that exact spot in Greece does not look like how it is today. It's been reshaped by a series of earthquakes, and it was much narrower back then than it is now. A lot of it has kind of collapsed and kind of sloughed off into the Aegean there. But at the time, it was much more sharp and short. And once you get 300 solid heavy infantry in there, you got a friggin' man's job to get them out of there. And again, they were originally supported by like 4,000 other Greeks, until those 4,000 other Greeks left, and then subsequently the Greeks were, the Spartans were betrayed and outflanked. But I say betrayed, somebody went over to the other side and showed the Persians where there was a trail that could kind of get up around those mountains and come down on the Spartans, I think on their left flank. So again, if you went down to a small enough scale, or you backed up where like your battlefield is like all of Greece, that might be interesting. But if you tried to do just Thermopylae in like one sandbox, there are plenty of games where it would work mechanically or mathematically. I just don't know how much fun it would be. It's literally just hammering a nail into wood until the wood breaks. There are lots of games like that. My brother and I, Ben, if you're still in the chat, well, I'll tell you, we did Panzer Leader in the Battle of Tarawa. And it was fun to build, and it was fun to try. The game itself was kind of a slog because it's like cat attack, fail, take losses, artillery barrage, cat attack, airstrike, cat attack, It was there was no maneuver, there was no movement. It was just literally frontal assault after frontal assault until somebody died. I have a bad feeling Thermopylae may be like that. But again, it depends on the system and it depends on the level you're playing at. If you zoom in to the skirmish level, I'm sure it'll be amazing. You're not going to do the entire Battle of Thermopylae in 28mm skirmish. You would need about 500 figures, more than that. You need 300 Spartans, and then after that, you're going to need at least 1,000 Persians of different types, because the Persian army was very eclectic. Yeah. So again, it depends on the angle and the level at which you approach it. Let's see what else we have going on here in Mr. Chat. Agincourt is one of my favorites. Bull Run, if you're talking about first Bull Run, definitely an interesting battle. Rorke's Drift, I don't know that much about it. I mean, I know what I've seen in the movie, but there's the British colonial wars have never really been my thing. Alamo, again, could be fun if you handle the victory conditions very carefully. Because Alamo isn't a battle, it's a siege. Sieges always get tricky and brutal because there's no movement, really, and the victory is predetermined. The Mexicans are going to win, period. If the Americans, or I should say the Texians, if the Texians at the Alamo have a snowball's chance in hell, you're not doing it right. So definitely interesting from a historical perspective. You're just going to have to come up with a way to handle the victory conditions to make that into a good fun game. I would also like to do Gettysburg, Antietam, Shiloh for the American Civil War. So Gettysburg and Antietam, that is definitely, you are definitely ambitious. Those are two big ones. Actually, so was Shiloh. Shiloh was a freaking massacre. Again, it would depend on the level. I have Gettysburg up here. A nice, easy game. It took takes maybe half an hour to set up. You can play the whole game in like 90 minutes tops. They've got 3 different scenarios in there for day 1, day 2, day 3, or if you want to play the whole war. I should say the whole battle. Obviously, each piece on the board is an entire division. But if you want to do all of Gettysburg in a comfortable afternoon, yeah, actually Glades Runner, my girlfriend has done it. I had Jen and her mom. How many people can say they've had their mother-in-law play a war game with them? I've had Jen and her mom play Gettysburg with me, and yeah, we had a blast. Again, it's this game which is not terribly complicated. I've got the Avalon Hill's other Gettysburg game, which is the opposite, man. It's like it goes down to past the brigade, down to regiment at least, regiment and battery. So artillery goes all the way down to the battery level, which is basically a company. And yeah, like 1,000 counters on this gigantic map board, and holy crap, it takes you longer to play the game than the actual Battle of Gettysburg probably took place, or took to unfold. Again, just 2 different ways of approaching the battle. Sitrep podcast says that I have lost focus. Have I lost? You talking about false focus on the camera? Because I seem to have gotten it back. If you're saying I lost focus in my rambling chat, I lost focus before I've never had focus. Well, I got blurry. Okay, hopefully it got better because it looks okay to me now. It's probably for me waving the books around in front of me like this that causes the camera to lose track of where I am. Let's see here. Vorpal back in the day, Twilight 2000. World War III game everybody played, and it was an RPG. Vorpal, that is correct. I used to cut class in my senior year to go play Twilight 2000 with my friends. Probably not the best use of my time, but hey, I already knew what college I was going to, the US of MC. So as long as I graduated, it was fine. I'd rather spend my last months of freedom playing Twilight 2000. We never did make it to Krakow, though. Sorry about that. Brack, the new version on Kickstarter. I've heard a lot about it. I've heard that they've simplified the rules a little bit, or they've at least streamlined them, because the way the rules in Twilight 2000 used to work, yeah. I mean, it was fun and it was detailed and it was accurate, but it was, some things just took too long. Any kind of area effect weapon, you'd be there all day trying to figure out the splash of one, 81mm mortar shell. It was pretty tough. But I've heard they've cleaned that. I've heard that they've cleaned that up quite a bit. Oh, but yeah, Twilight 2000. That was the game. That was way back in the day. Are we drinking or is he fuzzy? Uh-oh. Again, I'm looking at my playback. It seems to be fixed now. So hopefully we're doing okay. What else is going on here? Sitrep podcast says want. Okay, I may have missed something there. The Third World War by... Okay, yeah, thank you, Jen, again, for putting the title of the book. Was I drinking? No, I was not drinking. Oh, you have the Third World War, the Untold Story. Okay, Springtime, cool. Thanks very much. So, Springtime says in the chat that he has the Third World War, the Untold Story. That is the quasi-sequel to this. Half sequel, half rewrite, if I remember correctly. Springtime, if I'm botching that, go ahead and let me know. What the relationship is, narrative-wise, between the Third World War and the Untold Story. It's like an expansion. He cleans up some of the data, or some of the information that he presents in this first one. Again, it came out a few years later, so certain things came into sharper focus, and he was able to put out a little bit of a better product. Dennis Cross says, sorry. I just ordered Patriot Battles and Third World War, August 1985. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, Patriot Battles, again, it's not really a page turner, but again, it's broken up into these chapters. And what it's going to do is, okay, here are my little things here. How the Patriots worked, how the British worked, how officers worked, how you actually got a commission, how you could lose your commission, how much it cost. Like back in the day, you'd be able to buy your way into the British officer class. Motivation, how the actual armies, why the actual armies, what made them fight, how supplies worked, gears and weapons, artillery, medicine, women's roles, the role of women in the American Revolution, the role of African Americans in the Revolution. Native Americans, huge contribution, especially in the North. What else we got here? Oh, how Lexington really went down, Bunker Hill, Quebec. Okay, then he starts going into some of the battles and campaigns. New York, Trenton, Philadelphia, Saratoga, Camden, down there in the South where we had Kings Mountain, Guilford Courthouse, and Yorktown, and how a lot of those battles actually unfolded. But the first half of the book is all like the world of the American Revolution, if that makes any sense. And again, if you've got any nickels or dimes left in that book, again, if you don't have Joseph Blum Martin's book for the American Revolution, the only book of its kind. Alright guys, so I will finish up Mr. Chat here. Oh, Rasmus, hello. Welcome to the chat. The World War II data book by John Ellis, great if you are for larger scale battles. Yeah, absolutely. Viking is in the house. That is absolutely correct. Corporal Bright adds, the larger battles use the smaller miniatures, or hexes and counters, or computer graphics. They do make 6mm figures. I saw, oh yeah, I know about 6mm figures, trust me. I even have a few, just not nearly enough to build an army. They do make 6mm figures that I saw used for the Battle of Berlin. The Battle of Berlin was upwards of 3 million people, so I doubt they had the whole thing going in 6mm, but even a piece of the Battle of Berlin would look amazing in 6mm. Rasmus is running late again. He's been out fixing net connections. Oh no, sorry. I love all the games behind Jim. That is my happy place. This is most of my games. Most of my old Hex and Counter games. Not all of them, just most of them. I have Twilight Struggle up there on that other shelf. I'm trying to kind of looking over the camera here. Panzer Blitz is over there. I didn't put Panzer Blitz because the box is just literally falling apart. It would just look ratty back there. And I didn't put Rise and Decline of the Third Reich because this is the year 2021 and I'm live on camera on the internet. I don't want anything that says Third Reich behind me. Um, it sounds dumb, but I actually did think about it. I'm like, you know what? Let me not put Third Reich right next to my name for someone to screen capture. I can just see how that's going to go. True classics, absolutely. Yeah, some of these games are 40 years old. Oh, speaking of a 50-year-old game, 60 years old by this point. One of the other games I don't have is Tactics 2. Even Jen has played Tactics 2. It's that's a deep cut. It goes back to 1954, 1959, something like that. That's where it's old, blue versus red, and it's just, theoretical division level combat, some fictional content. But it teaches you the basics. It's about as complicated as Chinese checkers. I mean, it's really basic. But it shows you that tanks are faster than infantry, and infantry do better in mountains and cities, and how you do amphibious. They even have rules for weather, and they even have rules for nuclear weapons. But it's written in such a way where a friggin' 9-year-old can pick it up, and it's fine. So if you ever want to look into it's an old game, and the production value is kind of laughable. You can do something better in PowerPoint in 20 minutes. But if you ever see a copy of Tactics 2 and it's cheap, consider picking it up. It'll teach you how operational warfare. It's a nice gateway to operational warfare. It's not tactical. It's operational. So we talk about the different levels of wargaming. In a tactical game, you are fighting a battle, and it's all happening kind of at once. And every time you roll the dice, one of your units is taking a shot at another dice, at another unit, and you're seeing if you're hitting, if you're doing damage, things like that. Operational game is like an order of magnitude up. You're not fighting a battle. You're now fighting a campaign. And before, where you would have a battle, and every time you roll the dice, one unit was shooting at another unit. Now you got an entire country, or several countries, or at least a big region as your battle area, and each turn is several days, or a week, or a month. And each piece is a division of 15,000 men. And when they move around, and when they finally do fight, and you roll the dice, now that's that whole battle taking place. Every time your dice hit the table, 20 Flames of War battles just took place. And you get these results, and okay, we move on the next day to the next series of battles. And now your point is not to win battles, or not to win a battle. Every time the dice hit the table is a series of battles taking place. Your point now is to win a campaign. And then click it up one more, you get to strategic games. That's like Rise and Decline of the Third Reich, Twilight Struggle. There's lots of other games like that, where it's, okay, now you're pretty much the head of state, or at least like Eisenhower or MacArthur or Nimitz, or like you're commanding at least an entire, more than a theater. You're probably the head of state. And now your turns are measured in months, if not years. And your point is to win a war or series of wars. The biggest strategic game I can think of that isn't just crazy ass science fiction, Middle Kingdom. I wish I could remember who published it. It was in one of my Modern War magazines. You play the history of China. So you start off in the 5th century BC, and you conclude at the end of the Mao Zedong Chinese Revolution in 1949. So each term is a couple centuries, and you start off, you basically do 2,500, 2,600 years of Chinese history in one game. So pack a lunch. That's like one of the biggest strategic games I've seen, or at least the longest spanning strategic game I've seen. Pro tip, if you want to know if you're playing a strategic game, if your map is round, as in global, you're probably playing a strategic game. If your military decisions are being made by civilians and not by actual military men, you're probably playing a strategic game. You've almost kind of gamed yourself out of wargaming. You're now in a broad, global, geopolitical kind of a chess game instead. Cool. So scrolling down. No, you can do something better. Oh, no, you can do something better, says Jen Lemon. No, You can do something better in PowerPoint in 20 minutes. I'll take the pre-printed game. Yeah, but I'm talking about tactics too, man. That game is like 2 steps above a chessboard, but it's still fun. It's very light, and it'll teach you a lot, believe it or not. We played it for chores. Yeah, we actually used to do that. Oh God. So Jen and I almost made like a couples game, and not in a weird way, guys. Relax. Almost made like a couples game out of Tactics 2 and also Red Storm Rising, the Tom Clancy game. I think it was TSR produced it, and we would assign, just so there was like real world reasons for playing the game, we would assign different objectives to the different cities. So, you know, if we're playing, you know, Red Storm Rising, Nuremberg might be like take the trash out for a week, or Hamburg might be do the dishes for a week, or, you know, and it changed the game, because you're like, oh, I pretty much do the trash all the time anyway. I'll give up Nuremberg, but I hate doing dishes, man. So Nuremberg, or whatever the other city was, Hamburg gets defended to the last. I'm calling up the president. I'm wanting strategic weapons release authority. I'm gonna nuke somebody before I give up Hamburg, because I ain't doing no friggin' dishes. It was fun. It's just kind of goofy back in the day. Classic. Here we go. Oh, Risk. Oh, okay. I see. Jen says Risk. Sitrep Podcast says classic, and Jen follows up with no groaning from the grognards. Okay, this is my not groaning face. Risk. Now, actually, I do have some versions of Risk where they kind of expanded it, where it's not just like the classic Napoleonic game. That it makes a little bit more sense, but usually I don't really consider Risk a war game, to be perfectly honest. Decision Games, War Game, China. Oh, Middle Kingdom. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, Jen's like my research assistant. She got all the. I'm not surprised it's in Decision Games, because it was in one of these magazines. This is the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about, especially for Sitrep Podcast. This is not a book, obviously. This is a subscription. These are the people that used to make, or they still do. These are the people that started off making strategy and tactics. They've been around for 50, 55 years. I can't remember how long. A long time. They've been publishing magazines with a direct wargaming focus. In fact, almost every issue of the game comes with a wargame in it, or at the very least a wargame review that they wrote for this issue. Then you have to write in or log in to buy the game. But the game is introduced in every issue. It's been reviewed. They talk about some of the basics of it. They show you what some parts of the map look like, and then you can kind of make up your mind. They blend that in with the historical background. Yeah, so these guys come out with 18 new war games a year that never get talked about because reasons. They're not miniatures, I guess, but whatever. So they started off making strategy and tactics. That was like their their overall title. They would later produce World at War, which was just World War II. Every other month an issue comes out. So again, you have 6 issues of strategy and tactics, now 6 issues of World at War. And then starting in like 2013, 2014, they started coming out with Modern War, post-1945. This is the issue I got literally just now. This is May and June of 2021. And it's got Objective Kessel. Can the Russians reach the Rhine in 7 days? Most analysts say they can reach the Rhine in less days than that. But again, it goes into all the stuff, both hypothetical and historical. And again, there's usually a game, or at least some really good maps. Here's their projected, straighten that out there. Here's their projected invasion of West Germany. Again, everyone has their own take on the Team Yankee scenario. Yeah. So again, if you can find it in Barnes & Noble, Barnes & Noble actually carries it on their magazine shelf. Try a couple issues. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe. Again, great maps, great detail, little articles of information. You don't have to read a whole book to get conversant about something. And once you get like 10 or 20 issues of this thing under your belt, you're going to have like a little library. You're going to know a lot of shit. You're going to be correcting Oriskany in the YouTube channel. So I take it back. Do not subscribe to Modern War.